Hello everyone, I think we're live. So welcome to Collapse Times this Sunday evening eclipse day. We're going to cover a bunch of different subjects today. I'm going to try to be concise. I somehow feel like it takes me an hour to cover something that like regular news people cover in like 15 to 20 minutes. So I want to try to put a bunch of things in here. We're going to talk a little bit about the astrology of the city of Chicago, where Donald Trump has threatened to wage war by sending ICE and the National Guard in. The eclipses are hitting Chicago's sun directly. We'll take a quick look at how the eclipses are impacting the United States Sibley chart. We're also going to take a quick peek at Israel's chart, which deserves a full video. So here I just want to do kind of some foreshadowing of that and address what somebody was asking about last time regarding war between Iran and Israel and what in the astrology might correspond to that. And then I'm going to try to talk economics a little bit and talk about Uranus and Gemini and the decline of dollar dominance. So anyway, happy eclipse season, everyone. We are in the portal now. The eclipse happened at 2:08 Eastern time this afternoon. So I do have a couple of eclipse season specials going on. If you're interested in getting any personal support this season, past life readings are open. I offer 10 of those every eclipse season. There's still 5 left right now. There's a link below if you want to grab one of those. And I also have a discount on my package of readings called the Karmic Deep Dive that includes a past life reading and also 2 in-person readings where we flesh out all that you need to know about the nodes in your natal chart, which describe your soul's evolutionary arc. And very, very useful to have these layers of your personal story. Always, but especially during eclipse season, because everything to do with your karma and your past lives and the way that they're echoing through in this life gets super activated at eclipse season. So more information at the links in the description box about those. I also have horoscopes for eclipse season now up on my Horoscopes by Hummingbird channel. Those are rising sign horoscopes, as well as one video that just like describes the overall energies of each eclipse and the nodes in Virgo and Pisces. And I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep going with the horoscope channel because it's not growing the way I hoped that like a more normal algorithm friendly astrology channel might. But if I ever stop doing horoscopes on the horoscope channel, I will start putting them on this channel for channel members only. So we'll see. You know, I'm not going to turn that channel off right away, but if you want to support this channel, if you want to support my free content, the best way to do that is becoming a channel member. It's just $2.99 a month. I'll be announcing our next members only live stream coming up soon. Before we dive in, let's take a look at the cards from last week, and we'll talk about the just astrology of the moment real quick. So last week, the cards that we got were the Mirror for the archetype card and the reddening card, Iosis, for the alchemy card. And I will actually say a little bit more about my thoughts on these in just a moment when I talk about the current astrology, because I don't know, I feel like the reddening card is kind of the opposite of what I am feeling with this eclipse in Pisces, and with Saturn having moved back into Pisces. This reddening card is about like vitality and life force energy and readiness, and there's some kind of aggression in it, but kind of like in a good way, like passion coming up. And I don't know, I feel like kind of the opposite with Saturn dropping back into Pisces, but maybe the Mirror card is inviting a reflection on what it felt like when the Aries energy was activated. So I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Always love to hear in the chat if anyone has any reflections on these cards from last week and like how they played out over the past week. So let's look at the chart for the moment. So this is the chart for the actual eclipse. So as I said, we just had the eclipse a few hours ago this afternoon. It was a lunar eclipse in Pisces. The sun and the moon are in very tight proximity to the nodes. So this is a big eclipse, a total eclipse. Out of the two eclipses, this one is the biggest, kind of the fastest, biggest change of energy. It has the biggest impact. It's a north node eclipse. So wherever you have Pisces in your natal chart, there's a big call right now to expand and to evolve in that area of life. There's definitely maybe a call to like loosen your grip somewhere and release control and surrender into something. The eclipse could also be about embracing the mystical and spiritual aspects of your life, or leaning into creativity, inviting in like divine inspiration. We also have Jupiter. Jupiter is the ruler of the eclipse, and it's in a trine to the moon and the north node. So overall, like, this is a pretty flowing, supportive, benevolent energy. And wherever Cancer is in your chart, there might be something specific, some kind of Jupiterian, supportive, generous energy that is supporting your process wherever you have Pisces. Also with the South Node in Virgo, Mercury pretty close to a conjunction to the Sun. This is already the midpoint of the Mercury cycle, believe it or not, that started in the middle of the previous Mercury retrograde. And it's not, I would say with these energies in Virgo, it is not a time for judgment and logic and critique. The South Node in Virgo is asking us to release some of those layers. So let yourself be imperfect and don't try to understand everything, and you know, whatever situation you might feel like this eclipse applies to. And then, yeah, so Saturn is back in Pisces. Here's Saturn at 29 degrees of Pisces. And this energy does feel pretty heavy to me. Like, I have been sleeping longer hours than I wish to be. My brain is just kind of not wanting to wake up in the morning. I have felt kind of foggy. And even when I have, you know, things planned for the day that are enjoyable, they have mostly just felt heavy. Like, I just kind of want to laze around all day. So like I said, that's kind of the opposite of the energy in that reddening card. But at least for me personally, those two cards together, I kind of feel like with Saturn back in Pisces, I'm getting a reflection and some clarity about what the Aries energy felt like and kind of what I want to aim myself towards. And there's an article you can find on my Medium if you're interested that I wrote about Saturn's transition from Pisces into Aries and kind of this back and forth that it's making and how that corresponds to the polyvagal ladder. So like the different nervous system states that it's not always linear, but like there is this aspect of polyvagal theory that talks about the ladder, how fight or flight, or how the rest and digest are more like the freeze state. The freeze state, the dorsal vagal activation is at the bottom, and then you have to climb the ladder into fight or flight before you can come up into the ventral vagal state that's more like openness and a relaxed nervous system and curiosity. So anyway, I feel like there's an interesting nervous system correspondence to Saturn and the Pisces Aries threshold. I didn't put that in the description box, but if you're interested and if you're feeling maybe a little more of a freeze state coming on with Saturn back in Pisces, you might relate to that article. Yeah, Sarah said the fog is real. It is, man. And it doesn't help to have the eclipse also happening in the sign of Pisces. I feel just pretty messy, pretty Piscean, 1 foot off the earth, just mushy, messy brain going on right now. And yeah, I don't know. For myself and for anyone, you know, taking my advice, I don't want this to be something that gives you permission to slack or be leaky in places that you know you should not. But I also do feel like there is an element of a call with Saturn and Pisces to lean into Pisces themes of surrender and compassion for ourselves, and the kind of not trying to be in control, and also remembering Saturn as a long-term process, because ultimately the way that we make the changes that Saturn wants from us, it's never going to be something that happens overnight. It's never going to be something that happens with like a choice you make one time. So especially if you're like me and you kind of witnessed this like more clear, motivated, less foggy side of yourself when Saturn was in Aries, and you kind of feel like you're losing that compassion alongside like holding Saturnian boundaries that you know you need to hold, like dancing between those things maybe is my recommendation for working with the energies. This week we also have Mars moving into an opposition with Chiron. That is not exact until the 16th, so about a week and a half from now is when it's exact, but we'll probably feel it building this week. And any Mars-Chiron aspect does tend to be kind of irritating to a karmic wound that, you know, as Chiron goes around the zodiac by transit, it activates different parts of each person's wound. So if you know where Aries is, and if you've been following the long-term process of Chiron and Aries, you might be tuned into like kind of specifically what's getting activated. It can have something to do with identity, agency, autonomy, like, you know, having your own individual singular will and being able to like put that into action. But, you know, the experience with Chiron sometimes makes us feel kind of like we're weak in that way, like that Aries flame is weak. So Mars transiting around there can activate that. And my advice with Chiron always is to treat any experience you're having like a wound. So treat it with a lot of compassion. Be still with it. Don't expect it to heal overnight. Instead, just, you know, breathe with it as much as you can, the same way you might use your breath to stay present if you're, you know, having a physical wound activated. And also sometimes, you know, somebody might even accidentally touch your wound, and even that accidental touch can hurt and can cause kind of a reaction, like a flinch or a drawback. So you can notice that emotionally too. Send love to that part of yourself. All right, so let's just go right to Chicago's chart. Oh no, let's look at this fun meme real quick that Donald Trump posted. Yeah, so the other day, Donald Trump officially changed the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. These days, they also like call the soldiers war fighters instead of soldiers or troops. Like, it's just really weird. So yeah, then he posted this bizarre meme on Truth Social, and he's threatening to send the National Guard into Chicago now, as he has done in DC and LA. So I actually checked the astrology of all three of those cities, and all three of them have suns that are in direct aspect to this eclipse. So that's pretty wild. Let's look at Chicago first. So there's a couple different dates you can use for Chicago, but this seems to be the most common one, March 4th, 1837. The house placements don't matter. This is just a noon chart, but you can see that that places the sun for Chicago at 13 degrees of Pisces, and we just had this eclipse at 15 degrees of Pisces. So that's pretty interesting. You know, the sun it can be about the leader of a city. Sometimes you're reading a mundane chart that way, that like the sun is representing the executive in one way or another. So this could be referring to the mayor. It could be referring to the governor of Illinois. But also the sun is about a city's light and its personality. So it is kind of pretty heavy to have that being eclipsed. Definitely the traditional mundane astrologers of yore who wrote the original books that were just all about like should you go to war at this time, or when is the king going to die? Like, they would see this as a very, very ominous thing to have happen right in time with this announcement that there's going to be war, imposed on the city of Chicago. And just real quick, I'll show you DC and LA's charts. So DC was incorporated as a city in 1791, September 9th. So it has a 16-degree sun. So the sun for DC is opposite the moon, conjunct the sun during this full moon eclipse. And then LA, I guess, I didn't realize this, but LA was founded as a Spanish colonial town even before Washington, D.C., so it has a birthday in 1781, September 4th, so a 12-degree Virgo sun, so also conjunct this eclipse. So I don't know what to make of all that. I don't think there's like too many troops left in LA. I think there's just like a small amount that are guarding the deportation centers. But in DC, as far as I know, there's still a whole lot of troops. And since DC and LA both have the eclipse where the south node is, whereas Chicago has it conjunct the north node, I wonder if Chicago will respond differently. Maybe there will be less acquiescence, like less rule following from Chicago. I do also think it's important to keep reminding ourselves that Nessus is involved here. So Nessus and the north node have been conjunct for a long time. They've been kind of crossing over one another as the north node goes backwards and Nessus goes forward slowly. And this relates to, so Nessus has themes of power and like abuses of power. And Nessus in Pisces is specifically about the kind of abuse of power that is like gaslighting and shady, like psychologically messy abuses of power. And I think that, one element of Nessus being conjunct the north node is some portion of the population is like starting to see through some of the propaganda and the gaslighting that is like done by the government. So anyway, in Chicago and in Illinois, some of the politicians, including the governor, J.B. Pritzker, are kind of talking a big game as if they're going to like resist what Trump wants to do. But, Gavin Newsom in California also like talks a big game, but like is just as much of a clown show as Trump. Really, like he hasn't really done anything to like, at least let me know if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like it's just political theater. It's just totally a performance, his kind of trolling of Trump, and he hasn't done anything to like actually stop the ICE abductions or anything like that. So we'll see. Maybe it'll be different with Chicago because of the where the south node is versus where the north node is. We will see. And let's look at the Sibley chart real quick. So the direct aspect here with the eclipses is that this eclipse at 15 degrees of Pisces squares the ascendant descendant of the United States. And so the eclipse are kind of switching up the sense of identity in this country. They're kind of like a pressure release valve. I think that can definitely be the energy of eclipse season. That's something that's been kind of building up, kind of opens up, especially in the mutable signs. And I definitely feel like that is happening. It's been building for a while, but the eclipses are maybe bringing it to some kind of a head where more people who really, didn't think that Trump was going to do what he said he was going to do are waking up to that reality. And also some people are waking up to the system behind him here and there. Also here's Jupiter. So Jupiter is going to station at 25 degrees of Cancer over the fall. And so it's going to be conjunct the U.S. Mercury opposite the U.S. Pluto. This Mercury-Pluto opposition, I think, speaks to the United States big lie. So we tell ourselves, our national mythology tells us one story through this Mercury about the U.S. as savior, as nurturer, as comforter, as selfless giver. But the real truth of the U.S. nature is this Pluto and Capricorn in the second house, which is our national history of death and slavery and war and exploitation of resources, all for, the accumulation of resources in the elite of this country. Capricorn relates to the elite, to big business, to capitalism, and Pluto speaks to the kind of amoral way that class has handled the second house resources of the country, exploitative way. So I have a whole rant I want to go on sometime about ideology and national mythology and these kind of broader aspects of the United States big lie. So probably during this Jupiter station in the fall will be a good time to do that. Some people, I think that the Jupiter station will be amplifying and making more visible this massive contradiction between our national self-image and just the reality of what this country has always been, that has been kind of covered up by these Mercury and Cancer comfort stories. So Jupiter makes things visible, it amplifies, it magnifies. And so if there's going to be a segment of the population that is just desperately clinging to that mythology during the time of this station, they'll probably get crazier, like whatever that means. But there's also going to be a segment of the population, I think, that along the same lines of what the eclipses are doing now, that's starting to see this contradiction and this reality more clearly, with Jupiter's just sitting there. Like, Jupiter tends to create situations where you can't look away. It can also have the effect of kind of like a bubble popping, of like going beyond a certain horizon or a certain limit. So yeah, I will definitely have more to say about what I mean by the United States big lie, and that will be a good time to do it over the next few months. All right, so next, making good time here. Next, we're going to Israel's chart. So like I said, this deserves a full video, and I will definitely give it that at some point. But there's a couple pieces that I just want to start bringing into the conversation. And like I said, somebody asked about Israel and Iran going to war last week. So I do see couple things in the transits here that make me think of that. Israel continues to murder Palestinians by the hundreds. There have been hundreds massacred in Gaza City just in the past couple of days. It is so horrific. They are monsters. I do not believe there is any reforming this egregore of this ideology, and I don't know where this kind of spirit is taking the people that it has possessed. But I do think that the astrology has some clues. Eclipse season doesn't make any super important direct aspects, but the second eclipse on the 21st is in a square to the Jupiter in Sagittarius in the third house. So definitely one layer of this Jupiter in Sag speaks to the fundamentalism of the Zionist ideology. I think another layer of this speaks to Israel being populated by like a very international population like by a lot of people that are not native to the land and who come from the Jewish diaspora around the world. Israel has a high proportion of people with dual citizenship, maybe the highest in the world, but I couldn't find clear statistics on that. And there has been a continuous exodus of people with dual citizenship from the occupied territories since the beginning of the genocide. So I do wonder if the eclipse may be kind of like a pressure release valve around that. If it activates this Jupiter to have more of this population leave the country, or maybe it'll activate them in some other way. I don't know. But the two transits that I think are really important for us to be paying attention to are Uranus in the midst of a square to the Mars in Leo, Mars in late Leo here in Israel's 11th house, and Pluto coming into an opposition with the moon in Leo in Israel's 10th house. Anyone who's watched Collapse Times regularly probably knows, coincidentally, this Mars in Leo is pretty much conjunct Trump's. Trump's Mars is at 26 degrees Leo. Benjamin Netanyahu's Mars is at one of these late degrees of Leo also. So that's interesting. So the two of them alongside Israel are going through this Uranus square to Mars and Leo at the same time. So that's pretty wild. And that is over the course. Did I put the dates down? Oh, I have it a little further down. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Pluto opposing Israel's moon. That happens between February and December of next year. And it also retrogrades back to like almost an exact opposition at the end of 2027. So pretty much for the next 2 years, this Pluto opposite moon is happening. Mars in a mundane chart describes the military overall of a country, like a country's style of fighting, the temperament of its war fighters, that kind of just energy that it overall embodies. And so this late Leo Mars, obviously massive narcissism, blind pride. This whole like Leo stellium is pretty wild. So Mars, Saturn, Pluto, and the moon all in Leo here. And like it is just like mega aggressive chosen people syndrome, like illustrated right here. Mega over fixation on the individual self, or in this case, like the national ideology. And then, so the moon is the temperament of the people in a chart for a country or a city. It's going to be the temperament of the people, like the public overall, or the masses, those kind of words you would use to describe the moon. And so the same affliction of narcissism is just really written out here in Israel's chart. And it is like an interesting distinction from the US chart, where we have so many Cancer placements, the moon in Aquarius. In the US, obviously the same like sociopathy is there, but the self-conceptualization is different. Like people here genuinely think of this country as nurturing and giving and supporting democratic ideals. But in Israel, it's like that's not even part of the national self-conceptualization. Like moon and Mars, Pluto and Saturn, like it is just all narcissism. And honestly, like having these planets, Pluto, Saturn, the moon, and Leo in the 10th house, like I just feel like that is also like fascism. Like having the moon in the 10th house with Pluto and Saturn there, like that is control of the people by the 10th house in the mundane chart, which is the executive. It is the leader area of the chart. It is where the government and the rule enforcers, like, and the rule makers, like, that's all the 10th house. I don't know. Okay. So the analysts that I listen to on these subjects, which is mostly Aaron Good on American Exception, and then like whoever he has on his show, people are pretty convinced that we will end up going to war with Iran. They're pretty convinced that Israel is determined to instigate that and to pull the United States into it. So there's the most recent episode, maybe, or a very recent episode of American Exception. Aaron Good had Larry Wilkerson or Gary Vogel on. So these are just people who are very knowledgeable in this subject matter. Both of them are ex-military. They spent years or decades in West Asia, like, you know, working in the negotiations between different countries in that area. So they're, you know, they have a pretty good eye on the situation, a pretty sharp read, and they're pretty convinced that this is going to happen by the end of the year. It would not be a rational move on Israel's part. It definitely wouldn't be a rational move on the U.S. to support them, but we're not talking about rational people here. And so with both of these transits, so this Uranus squaring the Mars, activating Trump and Netanyahu both directly, activating all of these Leo and Mars, these out of control warrior energies. And then Uranus has an energy of destabilization, and just anything unexpected can happen anytime. So the 12-day war between Israel and Iran was between June 13th to the 24th. And the first exact square of Uranus to Israel's Mars was on June 4th. So that's a pretty direct alignment. There are two more squares. One's on December 20th, one's on March 20th of next year. The squares for Trump and Netanyahu are going to be in that same time frame. So put that timing together with what these non-astrological experts say pretty strongly. Like, I feel like we can lean into anticipating that there could be more activation, more insane warfare. Let's just say that in that region at that time. And then Pluto opposite the natal moon. This could speak to real destruction in the occupied territories. The people on American Exception, they are pretty sure that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon, at least before the end of the JCPOA, that when Trump took like America out of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, they're pretty sure that Iran is building a nuke now. And one of them, I forget which one, but on this recent episode, they said all it takes is one nuke to wipe out Israel. Pluto, of course, is associated with nuclear weapons. Pluto's discovery coincides with the timing of the breakthroughs in atomic physics that led to the development of nuclear weapons and nuclear energy. And Pluto's archetype also sort of speaks to like the forbidden realms that we access when we fuck with things on the subatomic level beneath the surface of like the material world. So that's possibility here. Like those archetypes and that timing would totally align. Even if it's not a nuke, this Pluto opposition to the moon is going to describe a dark, challenging, and destructive time for the people of Israel, like people who identify with the Zionist ideology anywhere on the globe, because so much of this moon just also relates to that ideology, but for sure, people that are living there especially. And, you know, this transit has been slowly creeping. Pluto tends to leave omens. It gives us a chance. It moves so slowly that, like, as it comes up on a transit like this, if you're having a natal a Pluto transit to your sun or your moon or some personal planet, like before it actually gets into that alignment, there will be omens, and Pluto will have given you opportunities to like see what's coming and like embrace the death process. So if you do that and you like accept the omens, then your Plutonian process is ultimately going to be more graceful. In this case, not graceful the way that the Zionists are dealing with the questioning of their narcissistic ideology. So I think this Pluto transit represents like a rough awakening for the people that are clinging to that. It may not be good for many other people either, especially in the region, but at least we can hope that Pluto will bring the unmissable lessons on impermanence that Pluto always does to the very possessed humans of this country. Yeah. If you have gone through Pluto opposite your natal moon or Pluto conjunct your natal moon, you'll probably either one, if you know what that's like on a personal level, you can have some sense of like what this will be like on a national level. All right. Any questions? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, we will get into our final subject for today, which is the decline of dollar dominance. So this is really just another subject that I kind of want to put a pin in. Even just within this subject, there are multiple places that we could go much deeper. So I didn't pull up any pictures of this, but there is a link in the description box to a video that has some good footage if you haven't seen it. But like last week, China did this massive military parade through Beijing. And Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un of North Korea were there with Xi Jinping kind of walking at the front of this military parade. So the video linked below is a breaking point segment where they have some good commentary on it and show some compare and contrast footage between China's military parade and the United States military parade that they did in DC a couple months ago. And oh my gosh, it is just really interesting. It is just a really big difference in like the ability of the Chinese military to like put on an impressive show of coordination and mass like mobilization and focus and just straight up military strength. Just compared to what the parade in DC looked like, where there was like nobody there. The tank was like creaking as it was rolling down the street. There's some footage of like the US troops that were like could not march in unison at all. This is like pretty wild, like what a big difference it is. And so this leads us to this conversation about the decline of the United States dollar. So the dollar has had its worst year in 2025, the worst year since 1973. It's declining in value compared to the rest of the global currencies around the world. Trump's policies, especially the tariffs, but also the general way he's kind of seen as a wild card and like not a rational leader, that has been accelerating the decline of the dollar, but it also is not something that is just starting or just happening because of Trump. So another link below is to a geopolitical economy report video that if you want to get nerdy into all the different aspects of like what's happening economically right now, kind of surrounding the decline of the dollar, you can check that out. I do really recommend geopolitical economy report with Ben Norton, and for like kind of shorter soundbite economic stuff, World Affairs in Context with Lena Petrova. Both of those are really good YouTube channels if you want to get into more about this stuff, like multipolar economics, basically. So right now, and continuing through the next couple years, we have this trine happening between Uranus in the very earliest degrees of Gemini and Pluto in the very earliest degrees of Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius, as I have talked about, corresponds to this rising multipolar world, to the end of the U.S. as the global hegemon, especially the way that it's been since the end of the Cold War. China is a massively rising power. Russia and India in different ways also are really becoming anchors in a multipolar world. So that really corresponds to the archetype of Aquarius, which is very decentralized, as opposed to Capricorn, which is very centralized and hierarchical. I have a whole video on Pluto and Aquarius in the multipolar world if you want to check that out. I made that video back in the spring when Pluto was moving into Aquarius for the first time, and this thesis that Pluto and Aquarius corresponds to the rise of the multipolar world has grown much stronger since then, although it seems to be one of these things that pretty much no other Western astrologers name directly. So anyway, that's Pluto in Aquarius. Then we have Uranus in Gemini, and I've mentioned before Uranus leaving the end of Taurus and moving into Gemini as maybe relating to something to do with the economy or the stock market. And the end of Taurus, there's no other place in the zodiac that represents consolidated wealth as much as the end of Taurus. So with Uranus moving into Gemini, I at least had or have, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of hope there that the general way that wealth is so consolidated at this moment could disperse a little bit. Like there could be some redistribution of resources from the 0.001% like down to the masses. I don't know. I feel like my hopes are less high about that than they were even a few months ago, but we'll see. But it is hard to see this Uranus ingress completing without some kind of change to the fact that wealth is so consolidated right now. So somehow I didn't notice until recently that the Bretton Woods conference took place the last time that Uranus was in Gemini at the United States Uranus return in 1944. Bretton Woods was a conference that was held in New Hampshire. There were 44 countries that were involved. Of course, the U.S. was the leader, and this was a whole year before the end of World War II, but they were already meeting to discuss a post-war monetary order. And this is where the U.S. basically decided that the dollar would be pegged to gold. The rest of the countries who were part of that like alliance, which wasn't every country, but it was all the ones who like didn't want to be on the Nazi side, basically. That's not true. It's more complicated than that. But anyway, countries that were down to side with the United States agreed to have their currencies pegged to the dollar. Dollar is pegged to gold. Other currencies are pegged to the dollar. So this is the conference that created the monetary system that the world has been operating in since then. Except recently, there are these moves that have started to take things in a different direction. In the 70s, there were some changes, and the changes were like 71, 72, 73. So Uranus was in Libra at that time. It was in a trine to the United States natal Uranus, and that was when they changed from the dollar being pegged to gold to the dollar being pegged to oil. They basically pressured Saudi Arabia to sell its oil only in dollars. So there's this concept of the petrodollar, which is also something that is coming into question now. And there's not really much like enforcement mechanisms, as far as I can tell, for oil producing countries to have to sell their oil in dollars. So some of them are selling some, oil directly to China or to Russia, because the United States cut off like Russia's access to oil a couple of years ago. So anyway, that's just one reason why these changes are starting to happen. But countries like China and Russia have been de-dollarizing for a while. And this is stuff, as you can tell, as I am talking about it pretty awkwardly, like this is stuff I'm just still trying to learn and wrap my own brain around. So I won't get into a lot of details, but basically a big reason why the dollar is declining is because Russia and China and other countries, even allies like Japan, don't want to buy U.S. debt anymore. They don't consider U.S. treasuries a safe investment anymore. And so, if someone is here listening to this who understands these things and you want to correct me, I'm wide open to that. But like, as I learn about this stuff, the more I learn, the more it just seems like a massive circle jerk. Like the whole economy is just this like massive complicated system that's really just like unnecessary and like kind of futile. And so like the US can only afford our massive military investments because we go further and further into debt every year. And the way that we're able to go into debt, the way that we're able to borrow money, is because other countries are willing to give us that money in the form of a loan, and then they get paid interest on that. And countries that trade a lot with the US, or that the US buys a lot from, that end up having a surplus of dollars, like China, the best thing that they have thought to do with it is to loan it back to the US. And that's just kind of weird because it means that they're like paying for our military expansion. So that part I just don't quite understand. There's also a part where like the Federal Reserve just like prints new money, like when it also needs to like contribute to the debt, or when it wants to control the interest rates on the debt. And like, it also just seems kind of arbitrary and like a circle jerk. So yeah, I'm open to correction if I am interpreting that wrong, but like, it's like the way that it does make sense is if you think of the whole economy as just like a game for like greedy nerds, like a gambling parlor for like greedy, nerdy, elite people. But so because the United States has so much dominance, this is why China and Russia and other countries want to de-dollarize. They also want to de-dollarize because the U.S. has acted in very gangster-like ways with just like freezing assets. So basically stealing the assets of countries that it doesn't like or want to control. And it did this a lot to Russia once the Ukraine war started. It's also done this to Venezuela and to Iran and a lot of other countries too. When it wants to control them, it just freezes their assets, that because the United States is like the policeman of the World Bank, so it can just do that. And there's no, we call it like sanctions here, but there's no real like process that has to be gone through to create sanctions, other than just like the US decides you can't have access to your money anymore. I'm definitely oversimplifying that part, but sorry for this. This is what happens when you try to talk about something that you don't totally understand. What I'm getting at here is, I don't know if there will be a stock market crash, but definitely the decline of the dollar corresponds to Uranus entering Gemini, the Pluto-Uranus trine, and the upcoming United States-Uranus return. There's mainstream economists that are starting to acknowledge that the dollar decline is really happening, that there are a lot of kind of canaries in the coal mine, a lot of kind of buried signs of this being a transition that is not going to stop anytime soon. And most of the people predicting the decline of the dollar in the West are predicting still a slow decline, something that's going to take decades and decades to unfold. But there is also always the possibility of a dollar rout, which is where a bunch of these countries and massive private investors too, if they were losing confidence in the dollar, would just pull all of their money out at once. And that would, if that wasn't already triggered by a massive stock market crash, that would trigger a massive stock market crash. So I'm wondering if this corresponds to the United States Uranus return. So that would make it, if there is a real crash of the dollar system at the United States Uranus return, that would make it exactly one Uranus return from Bretton Woods, where the dollar system was established. And also, if you saw my J.D. Vance episode, you might remember he has his Chiron at 7 or 8 degrees of Gemini, so it's pretty much exactly conjunct the Uranus in the United States natal chart, and it would really make a lot of sense astrologically if J.D. Vance becomes president when Uranus is conjunct his north node, maybe sometime next year, and then the following year Uranus is conjunct his Chiron. It's the United States Uranus return, and he has to preside over a massive stock market crash or a massive loss of the dollar. Something will happen when Uranus is conjunct his Chiron, something that is very visible, and that he maybe has to be a scapegoat, just as Kamala Harris had Saturn conjunct her Chiron at the time of the election last year, and she was kind of the scapegoat of the Democratic Party. Something similar might be kind of in the air with Vance in a couple of years. It's confusing to me whether the cockroaches want the decline of the dollar or not. Maybe long term they want it, but maybe it's happening faster than they would want it to. We'll just see. We'll come back to this for sure. So next week, there's some interesting UAP news. So we'll get into that next week because there's a congressional hearing. At least there's supposed to be a congressional hearing with testifiers, whistleblowers testifying about unidentified anomalous phenomena in Congress this Wednesday. There have been some of these in the past. They've been kind of disappointing. It's usually pretty disappointing who is selected to actually testify. And there also ends up being a lot of things that they just can't say publicly. So we'll see. But I will let you know how that goes. And we'll see if there's any interesting astrology that we can pull up that corresponds to it. That is it. So if you have any questions, let me know in the chat. Otherwise, we'll pull cards for this week. And then I'm going to sing you a song, which is one of my favorites. I think you'll like this one. It's a little less of a karmic love song and just like a heartfelt self-love kind of song. It's called Surrender, I Am Stronger. Okay, somebody said, will the dumping of the dollar lead to a world war, and when? I mean, I don't know. The United States Uranus return has a track record of being a time when this country is at war. I don't know about another world war. I don't know about that. The United States would have to really instigate that in a big way. For all of China and Russia, for all of their military technology advancements and all the way that they show it off, I don't think either of them wants endless warfare the way that the US has seemed to. I don't think that either of them has the same, I don't think either of the leaders there has the same like sadistic manifest destiny belief system as the US. So I don't know if there will be another world war, but who knows? Who knows? It will be something never before seen in history. Vance's natal Uranus is in his 4th house, so it's like opposite his Chiron. I think it's in like a direct opposition, so it'll be his Uranus opposition around that same time that Uranus is conjunct his Chiron. All right. Let's see what messages the cards have for us for this first week of the eclipse portal. Gnosis is the archetype card. Antimony is the alchemy card. Gnosis keywords are innermost knowing, mystic truths. True knowledge is not found in facts and figures in scholarly books on library shelves. Rather, Gnosis points to the deep and timeless archetypal wisdom that rises from the felt experience of having touched the unknown with every one of the senses. Those who are drawn to Gnosis find themselves in esoteric studies, likely involving mysticism, alchemy, healing, or perhaps science. Knowing is their calling, not knowing is their job description. No matter how far the alchemists take their studies, they come to the ultimate conclusion that facts slip towards mystery, and soon the mystery results in facts. This card signifies a knowing that is life-changing. Once you experience it, you are forever changed and become a guardian of Gnosis. The eternal mystery is calling you. Study your passion in the deepest way available to you. Some light manifestations are contemplating the mystery, unanswerable questions. Darker manifestations are over-intellectualizing and literalizing, asking others. To go deeper, you could look at Bruce Naumann's The True Artist Helps the World by Revealing Mystic Truths. And I like this. Those who say they don't, those who say they know, don't. Those who say they don't know, know. Yeah, I used almost that same phrase in my description of Virgo and like the South Node in Virgo. That the Lao Tzu idiom, he who knows does not speak, he who speaks does not know. I feel like that's kind of something good to work with the South Node in Virgo. But overall, this card has a lot of Pisces energy. Very much like North Node in Pisces, and definitely like North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo. Definitely the call to let go of intellectual forms of knowing and linguistic, logical forms of knowing, and embrace more intuitive and Gnostic forms of knowing. Let's see about antimony. Wildness, fierceness, and hunger are the keywords. In medieval times, antimony became known as the gray wolf of alchemy. This was due to the metalloid's unpredictable qualities and its ability to eat away at materials in the laboratory. Gold is one of the few materials to withstand contact with it. For these reasons, this card must be read with delicacy. On one hand, it represents the wild and free spirit that longs to express itself in the world. On the other hand, it represents a fierceness that can turn destructive or corrosive at the drop of a hat. The message here is clear. Channel the gray wolf's energy towards creativity. Channel it to come out from the shadows and express itself. Embark on the creative project or adventure that's calling you, rather than focusing on why you can't. Once you begin, don't quit. The gray wolf responds to respect, not repression. And to go deeper, you could read Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. To ponder corrosion as medicine. The gray wolf can most easily be felt through the laboratory of the human body. So dance, run, shake, breathe to work with this archetype. And another interpretation of this material is that something is eating away or wearing away at the situation or person. Let this possibility open to deeper revelations. The wild and free spirit that longs to express itself in the world. Yeah, I mean, that feels kind of Piscean as well. And I think these are a perfect message for eclipse season. There's always, eclipses are kind of energetically dangerous times. They're kind of energetically destabilizing times, and that corrosion is something to watch out for. But yeah, hopefully we can all lean into the North Node and Pisces and let that current carry us. I like these cards too. All right. So just as a reminder for anyone who's new here, I am dripping out my EP of songs that I've been practicing and working on for a long time, and I don't have any planned release for this. I need to find the right musical collaborators at the right time, but I'm just sharing these songs one by one each week because it feels good. So I have already shared Timelines and The Omen, and tonight I'm going to sing Surrendered I Am Stronger for y'all. Oh, teach me how to pray, help me find the holy way, give me strength to face the day, a new sun's rising. I feel scared to write this song, 'cause what'll happen if I'm wrong? But surrendered I am strongest, I am flying, already tumbled off the edge, already took the final breath. I give it up, there's nothing left, some kind of dying. I'm calling in a gentle road, a bed to sleep in, food and clothes, a soul or two to share the load, take turns driving. Maybe there's answers up ahead, or just more demons to be fed. Maybe Maybe these words have already been said. Maybe I'm lying. I think she's lying, 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 lying. Oh, somebody's lying, 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 lying. But surrendered, I am stronger. I am right where I belong. Surrendered, I am stronger. I am right where I belong. Straight up though, God, I'm feeling lost. Had no idea what it cost to give it all up to the stars. Keep on trying and trying, but freedom always has a price. I wanna make the sacrifice. I'm gonna create my own life. Come through shining, shining, while joy and pain go hand in hand. This much I've come to understand. I'm waking up, watch me expand. Laughing and crying, crying, 'cause surrendered, I'm stronger. I am right where I belong. Surrendered, I am stronger. I am right where I belong. Surrendered, I am stronger. I am right where I belong. Surrendered, I am stronger. I am right where I belong. Yes, I can show the cards again. I might have forgotten to show them at all. Antimony and Gnosis. But I'll put a picture. I keep forgetting to put the pictures. I just get really lazy about that for some reason. But I will post that on the posts, community post section of YouTube. That was Surrendered. I Am Stronger. I hope you like it. It feels like a good Pisces eclipse one, maybe a necessary message. So I'll hang on just a minute longer to see if anyone has questions or feedback. I always welcome suggestions for what I could talk about too. Like if you guys ever had, if there's ever someone's chart you want me to look at or a certain event you want me to cover, feel free to email me or DM me on Instagram or, let me know in one way or another. And I would love to take suggestions and get into stuff that y'all are interested in or that you might have tuned into that I missed, because there is a lot of shit to keep up with right now. Whew, okay. We'll sign off for now. Many blessings. Thank you for being here.